Welcome to Strategy Simplified, Season 8, Episode 22. We're so excited to share the next edition of our mock case interview series with you. This case is led by a member of Management Consultant's MBB case coaching team, Pranav Aggarwal. The interviewee on the hot seat today is a recent law graduate seeking consulting roles at MBB and top boutique firms in London. Can she crack the case? Let's dive in to find out.
Once again, thank you so much for coming here, Shalini. We're glad to have you. Why don't you walk me through your CV and what you've been up to so far?
Okay, so I started LSE Law School in 2019. I've graduated just 3 months ago in July. Since then, I've done a consulting internship at a fintech back home. It was really interesting. It was very different from the type of legal internships I used to do. I would say that the thing that drew me the most to consulting as opposed to law was probably that in law, we kind of deal with the implementation side of projects. So after a project has been implemented, you go to lawyers and they carry out the contracts. Where in strategy consulting, you're kind of in those early phases of the project itself, which I found really interesting. Currently, I am also in some student consultancies where we do pro bono consulting work for certain clients, and I am leading my team.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And you clearly answered the why consulting piece of it, which is critical. And we can dive into this slightly later as well once we're reviewing it. So if you don't mind, we can dive into the case. I have one prepared for you. So let me know when you're ready and I can read the prompt.
Okay, sure. I'm ready.
Cool. So our client, Lizard Insurance, is a US-based auto insurance provider that recently acquired a rival auto insurance company, Medium Shore. As part of the acquisition, Lizard also acquired a subsidiary of Medium Shore named TechSize that provides software to many insurance companies. Lizard Insurance wants to know what they should do with TechSize, and they've brought us in to help.
Okay, got it. So this seems like an interesting case. So just to reiterate, our client is Lizard Insurance, and they are an auto insurance company. So recently they've acquired, Medium? And in acquiring Medium, they've also acquired a subsidiary of Medium, which is Excel. And what they do is sell software to insurance companies. So our client, Lizard Insurance, wants to know what they can do with Excel.
Yeah, just to clarify, that's TechSize, so technology size. The
TechSell,
subsidiary.
okay. TechSell, got it.
No, TechSize.
TechSide.
TechSize.
TechSide, okay.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay, great. So just a couple of clarifying questions. So just a little bit more about Lizard Insurance and this auto insurance. What does that actually entail, and who are their main clients?
So it's essentially a retail US insurance firm. So you and I would be its main clients. It doesn't have any predominant area where it really dominates, and they wanted to capture it with the Medium Shore acquisition.
Okay, and then just to learn a little bit more about Excel, what type of software is this and how does it actually help insurance companies?
So in the US, when a resident moves from one state to the other, there is at the back end, the auto insurance needs to file a few things with the government. So TechSize essentially helps you do that in a very automated fashion.
Okay. So it makes the system more efficient and
basically
easy. Okay. And lastly, would we say that Lizard Insurance has any specific goals that they're looking at? Are we thinking just profitability, or they have secondary goals as well?
No, they just want to know what they should do with TechSize.
They just want to know what they should do. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to take a minute to draft out some thoughts and get back to you.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Join Strategy Sprint. It's an MBB project experience condensed into a 1-week time frame. Each day, you meet one-on-one with your project leader to get mentorship and help on your work stream, as well as meeting daily with your team to ensure that you're developing a final deliverable that's going to be meaningful for the client. Prior to Project Week, you go through our online best-in-class skills training program that culminates in a virtual case competition. You can learn more or apply through the link in the show notes. There are only a few spots left.
Okay, so I've thought about this in two buckets. Firstly, thinking about the financial element that TechSide can bring to Lizard Insurance. And secondly, what are the options we have in terms of what we can actually do with TechSide. So firstly, thinking about the financial aspects of TechSide, breaking that down into revenues and costs. So when thinking about revenues, how can TechSide impact the revenues of Lizard Insurance? Will it bring them more customers? Will it up their prices and actually justify it for customers? Secondly, would it also enable Lizard Insurance to maybe sell more and produce more because of its automation? Secondly, looking at its costs. We know that it's a software technology, so it makes it more efficient. Does this mean that we would be able to lower our costs if we had implemented TechSide into Lizard Insurance? And if so, and on the flip side of that, is there an additional cost in order to maintain TechSide as a part of Lizard Insurance's business? Moving on to the second bucket, so there were three options that I could think of in terms of what we can do with TechSide. Firstly, keeping it. Secondly, selling it. Thirdly, other options that we can consider. So firstly, in terms of keeping it, to evaluate whether we should keep it, this would link back to the first bucket in terms of financials. Would the revenues actually outweigh the costs of keeping TechSide in our business? And if so, then maybe it'd be worthwhile to keep it. Secondly, selling it. If we feel that we maybe do not have the financial capabilities to incorporate TechSide into Lizard Insurance, maybe we can sell it to bidders, or it can be acquired by another firm altogether. And lastly, other options. So two things I could think of. Firstly, shutting it down altogether. So if we decide not to sell it and also not to keep it. And secondly, if we would want to change TechSide into a different type of business, maybe something that doesn't sell but leases its software to companies, or something that could help our business. So I think how I would like to start looking at this is maybe the financial implications of TechSide. How many companies have they sold their software to? What are their prices? And is there a high demand for them?
I think that's a great point to start off with. And we do have a little bit more information. So, to your point of whether they can increase Lizard's revenue, there's no cross-selling or upselling opportunity given how different the products are. Going forward, TechSide would require over $2 billion in investment for it to be able to maintain its market position. Also, currently, Lizard does not use TechSide, and there'll be substantial costs if they were to switch to TechSide.
Okay. So could you just repeat the last point? Lizard doesn't use TechSide, and
yeah, so Lizard, because every auto insurance needs to use a software such as TechSide, Lizard does not use TechSide. They have a competitor that they use, and there are really high switching costs involved.
Okay, understood. Okay, so I think based on this information, firstly, we would need to think about whether Lizard Insurance has the financial means to actually maintain TechSide, since it's a $2 billion investment. And I'm not too sure about Lizard Insurance's current financial stability, so we can look at that. And secondly, something else that we need to consider in terms of what we can do with TechSide, as Lizard Insurance doesn't use TechSide, understanding the reasons for this, because they're using TechSide's competitor, do they feel that the competitor is actually a better company as opposed to TechSide, and therefore TechSide maybe it's not worth switching to, and also as a secondary of that, not worth having as part of their business altogether?
Yeah, I think those are fair points. To answer your the second question, just so happened when Lizard started, they stuck with the company that they're with. And like I said, the switching costs are really high, so they've never really thought about it. But we do have a little bit more information on like who these players are and what this market essentially looks like. Hi, Jafet, if you could just give me screen sharing rights. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so here in this exhibit, we can see the different players in the insurance software market. And just before I get into it, do we know which player Lizard Insurance currently uses?
They use this insurance app.
Okay, understood. Okay, so based on this diagram, we can see that TechSize actually has only 15% market share, and it's one of the lower ones as compared to the competitors. I would say this is quite a big a market with many big players. There isn't just one big player that has majority of the market. So Software Guru, Insurance App, and Next 10 players are all major players in this market. TechSize, as compared to them, is a relatively smaller one. So based on this information, how Lizard Insurance can go about TechSize is two main ways. So firstly, improving TechSize. Secondly, selling TechSize. So in terms of improving TechSize, what they can do in order to increase TechSize's market share, if they decide that they wanted to invest in TechSize altogether and see a potential for them gaining market share over the next few years. So how can they make the technology more high-end, and how could they maybe increase their prices to get more revenues? The second option, selling TechSize. So selling TechSize, sorry, I'm going to rename that bucket as just mergers and acquisitions. So in terms of whether TechSize being acquired by one of the other companies, or if they wanted TechSize to acquire, for instance, a smaller player such as Goggle, so that they would then have a larger market share to compete with other players in the market. So based on that, I think what I would like to look at next would be, do we have any information about the differences between these businesses and what actually sets TechSize apart?
So these are very commoditized businesses. These are very similar businesses. But the points you've raised before, Lizard is not interested in putting or investing in TechSize. They don't see the use in it. And, given you can see how concentrated the market is, they expect there to be a buyer for TechSize.
Okay, since they expect there to be a buyer for TechSize, I think what we can look at is how we can now value TechSize as a business for potential buyers. And the information that I would like to use for that, if you have any data points on, firstly, who in the market do we expect to be one of the buyers? Secondly, the potential additional revenue that TechSize could bring to them, and also the additional cost that TechSize would bring to them.
Right, I think those are all fair points. So we do have a little bit more information, on that.
Okay. The insurance software market size seems to be quite stagnant at about $5 billion, $5 to $6 billion over the last 10 years. So we can see that, would it be fair to assume that firstly, this is not a growing market, and but it is still a really big market. So it is not a growing market, but it is a big market. And
I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, and so based on this, so just going back to the point of how much revenue that Texas could bring to a potential buyer, I would say that since previously we knew that Texas was 15% of the market, and the total market size in, assuming we are currently in 2020,
Yeah.
and that would mean that our total market, the total insurance software market size is $5.5 billion. Would that be a fair assumption?
Just take it to be 6 billion.
To $6 billion? Okay.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to find the total market size in terms of revenue of tech size, it would be 15% of 6 billion. So just to do that math quickly, that would be 3/20 times 6 billion. Okay, so that is about $0.9 billion
Yeah.
for tech size. Okay, I think this is quite a big number and would definitely bring them. So this would bring a potential buyer 0.9 billion in revenues for a buyer. Do we know about any costs that tech size might bring to a potential buyer as well?
So that profit margin is 25%.
Okay, profit margin is 25%. And we know that profit margin is the profit over the revenue. And we
Yes.
know that the revenue is 0.9 billion, which is 900 million. So the profit is 25% of 900 million. Okay. So that is a total profit of $225 million.
Absolutely.
And to calculate the total cost, so that would just be the revenues minus the profit. So 900 minus 225 would give us $675 million in costs. Okay, so we can see here that just based on these numbers, the cost is a large percentage of the total revenue, and it's a big proportion. So moving on into how we can actually value this business.
We have a little bit more information on that. So these have been recent acquisitions in the past, which might be able to serve as a benchmark.
Okay. Okay, so based on these companies, the one that I'm drawn to the most first is Insurance AppCo, because it is in the same industry as TechSize. And insurance software, its EBITDA was 300 million, and it's sold at 1.5 billion at a 5 times of its EBITDA price. Okay, so just to clarify, in terms of EBITDA, so although that's like earnings before insurance tax depreciation, amortization, do we have would it be fair to assume that the EBITDA would just mean the profit?
Yeah.
Okay, so the EBITDA of TechSize would then be $225 million.
Yep.
Okay. And would we also want to value TechSize's selling price at the same multiple that Insurance AppCo has valued their selling price, so at a 5-time multiple?
I think that's a fair assumption, given it's a similar industry.
Okay. So if we were to do that, then it would be 225 million times 5.
Mm-hmm.
Which gives us a total of $1.125 billion is what we can value tech size as a selling price. And I think that this is actually a really appealing opportunity for Lizard Insurance, considering that tech size was going to bring in $0.9 billion, assuming Lizard Insurance kept them, but we know we don't want to keep them. And so 1.125 billion is actually a bigger number than that. And so therefore we should be trying to sell tech size at a roughly $1.125 billion to potential buyers.
That's fair. Do you anticipate any risks involved with this sale?
Yeah. Okay, so there are 3 buckets of risks that I foresee in terms of selling tech size. Firstly, some market risk. Secondly, financial risk. And thirdly, operational risk. And fourthly, legal risk. Okay. So in terms of market risk, some market risk could include that suddenly the insurance software market takes a plummet and there is a new substitute in the market that has consumed all the market size. Secondly, financial risk. So carrying out a sale of this, we're not too sure about what that could actually cost Lizard Insurance and whether we have the financial capabilities to carry this out. Thirdly, operational risk, whether we have the expertise and whether we need to hire new people in order to carry out this risk. How are we going to evaluate all the potential buyers and ensure that we have chosen the right buyer? We need people and expertise to do so. And fourthly, legal risk, considering that we had bought TechSide as a subsidiary of Medium Shore, which is something we acquired, and I would assume that they would be in that contract as well. How are we able to separate tech size from Medium Shore? Is that allowed? Is there a clause in the contract that allows us to actually sell a subsidiary of an acquisition that we have done? So these are some risks that I could think of.
That's fair. So the CEO of Lizard Insurance is about to roll in. Do you mind wrapping up a case and giving us the final recommendation?
Yeah, sure.
We'll be right back after this quick message. Work with our team of ex-consultants to get ready for your case interviews, networking conversations, fit interviews, salary negotiations, and more. There's nothing like targeted feedback from an expert who's been in your shoes and has aced the consulting recruiting process. We've helped over 12,000 candidates pass the case interview at premier consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, as well as firms like Google, Amazon, and Capital One. Book an hour or more of one-on-one coaching time today by following the link in this episode's show notes. All right, let's get back to the show.
Okay, so the CEO came to us and wanted to know what they should do with tech size. So we recommend that there's an insurance sell tech size, and we have come to a valuation selling price of $1.125 billion, which we think is a very appealing price for Lizard Insurance. Some risks associated with this would be the operational risk of whether we can find people to do so, whether we have the expertise to sell this, and also some legal risk considering that they come as a subsidiary of Medium Shore. In terms of next steps, what we can do is actually properly dive deep into the contracts, looking at all our rights to share, to sell tech size, what we can do about that. Secondly, we have to search for buyers, potential buyers, and do our due diligence on them. Thirdly, searching for labor that can help us sell tech size and make sure that we have a worthwhile sale. Thank you.
Perfect. That was the case. How do you feel?
I think it was okay. It was enjoyable. I think at points I probably could have led the case better. So coming in before you had to ask me the questions, like just leading it in that way. And I think yeah, I'm interested to see what you have to say about all the questions. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job. I think if this were a final interview, it'll be right in that midpoint where you're like, you're good enough, but could have been slightly better. But like you're good enough, so I think that's the case. Like it'll actually depend on your behavioral to a large extent, in my opinion, in this situation. But I thought you did a great job at like just that right amount. Things that you could improve on, right? Like I think coming off the bat, just I think you're a little nervous, and it shows.
Okay.
Right, and there's no shame in that, right? Like everyone's nervous, even I was nervous, but I think just being able to keep a smile when you're interacting with the other individual, I think that really helps.
Yeah.
Even though you're nervous, if you're just smiling, it ends up making the entire environment a lot healthier for yourself more than the other individual. Right? It ends up being a conversation rather than it being an interview, right? And I know it's really hard. Like I've been through that where I got my Zoom link for the interview like a minute before my interviews began, and I was a mess at that point. But just like if you're smiling, the interview will not know what's going on behind. So that sometimes helps. Again, starting from the top for your prompt, I think you recapped everything, right? Like in certain cases that might not be necessary. Like in this case, I think it can just be short and sweet. Whereas, and I think this is where the nervousness comes in, right? Because once you got into the flow of it, it was crisp, it was precise, it was to the point. I think initially you were still trying to see what the situation is and get acclimatized, I guess. Like in this case, for me, the prompt recap would have been our client's Lizard Insurance. They've recently acquired another auto insurance player, Medium Shore, and they want to know what they can do with the subsidiary of Medium Shore, which is Texas. That's it, right? Like, end of it. We don't need to get into what Medium Shore is, what Texas is. The idea remains that you understand the prompt, and the interviewer knows that you understand the prompt as well. I think from here it was smooth sailing, right? Like your clarifying questions were great. You asked about Lizard, you asked about the target company or the target seller in this case, as well as what the motivation behind it, these are always great questions to ask. For your structure, I actually thought you did a great job on your structure, right? You took like under a minute 30 to make it and took about 2 minutes to deliver it, which is really good on timing. In terms of your structure itself, it was really precise, right? It was addressing it, and you could see it for yourself, right? Like you addressed everything that was in the case within your structure, and that served you as a good roadmap. And it was in depth enough. It was tailored enough. I don't think I have any comments on your structure. Keep doing that. That was a bang up job. But I think just one thing before you start your structure, a lot of these consulting firms are like the hypothesis driven. So they'd like at some point like you to say, okay, what your answer first really looks like, right? So in this case, I've taken like a minute or whatever time you've taken. Now I come back, and my first thing here would be, based on the information I have, I think Lizard Insurance should keep tech size. But obviously, in order to validate my hypothesis, I'd love to look at these two broad areas. Right, and that's it. Like, it's as simple because your structure essentially thinks of it. Like when you structure it, you've already thinking it, but it's subconsciously. So if you just say it implicitly, it adds a little bit of value, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the discussions and the questions that you were asking, they were really thoughtful. Especially when new information was being given, you were constantly updating your hypothesis. You're constantly thinking, okay, what can be the next step? So I really like that because this case really pushes you, right? To think, where do I go next? Is it keep? Is it sell? Getting more information, you're like, okay, new information. I think it's going towards sell. Let me see what I can find out more. On the exhibit piece, I would say take 5 to 10 seconds before you come out with the insight. Right? Because if you do that, you can digest the exhibit a little better. And then you can just come out with the insight, which in this case could have been like, for the first exhibit, it's a concentrated market or it's a fragmented market, however you want to perceive it. The time your reasoning is solid, it doesn't matter what you say. and loved your insights into, we don't have a large market share. I think you did a good job on the exhibit, as well as when you moved on to the next one, you connected the dots that I have the market share, this is the market revenue, this is market share, this is the overall market size, this is what a lot of people end up missing that. And that's the trick behind it, right? So this again tells the interviewer that you're understanding the material that's being presented to you. You're not just reading off of the chart and not really understanding what's happening. Again, love the way you drove to when you understood, okay, what the profit is, like, how do I value it? Love the way you drove there. Again, next exhibit, bang up job, straightforward. You're like, this is it, this is the multiple. These are my assumptions. Does it sound okay? Great work on that one again. I think so. There's a point in the case where it's pretty much done. And you're coming to the recommendation. I always suggest that you yourself start talking about certain risks or certain implications that a sale or in this case it could have been a sale, so that the interviewer doesn't have to kind of go push you maybe on the risk, or they don't have to tell you, okay, let's give. Because if you start talking about the risks, I could have been like, oh, okay, fine, you're giving me risks, let me have them. Or I could have been like, that's fair, but the CEO is walking in, let's wrap up the conversation. So that just pushes the drive even forward, because what you did really well, right? And I think this is something that's a lot of people miss, and our audience members should take note of this, is when you got that 1.125 number for the sale value, you took a second and said what that actually means, right? Like, what is the implication of that for Lizard? You were comparing it to the revenue that you would have initially gotten. You were talking about who the buyers might be. So that's a really good thing, right? Like, it also tells me, or the interviewer, that you can put everything in context as to what's happening. So you've done a bunch of complicated math. Now, what does it really mean? Like, at a high level, the question I'm trying to answer, what does it really mean? So I think that's spot on. Your recommendation, no comments on that again. Started with the answer, gave me a good reason behind why that's your recommendation, outlaid a couple of risks, and in the next steps you mitigated those risks as well as outlined a few more. I thought it was like I said, like right on that line where it's good enough. It's good enough. Yeah.
So in terms of the main takeaways to make sure that, I'm not just good enough, but like, yes, Warner is like, firstly, be more confident. So like, fake it till you make it. Even if I don't know what I'm saying, just smile and like try and convince them. Secondly, also like trying to drive the case before I even give you the opportunity to ask a question, kind of like lead into where I think the next question is going. And thirdly, trying to say my hypothesis before every like structure.
Basically, I think those are great. Yeah. That's a great way to summarize it. And you can understand what the rationale behind it as well, right? You'd be put in front of the client from day one, right? And if you're not exuding confidence in your questions or in your answers, the client's like, oh, is this correct? And you don't want them diving into or questioning your answers or your analysis in any way. So that's why like confidence becomes really important. Like you said, like fake it till you make it. A lot of the times you might not know what the answer is. And that's fine. You can ask, I have no idea about this, but this is what I think it might be. But I think, like you said, like confidence in this case ends up being critical.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but like overall, great job. I think you're in a great space.
Thanks for tuning in today. You can work with Pranav to get ready for your case interviews. See his calendar and book a session or two at the link in the show notes. To volunteer yourself as a candidate for a future case, the link to do so is also in this episode's show notes. That's it for this week. We'll see you on another episode very soon.